On today's show, our weekly Rinkside Roundups. We'll talk about standout performers across leagues on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, QMJHL and crossover scout for elite prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for elite prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the Rinkside Roundup, our weekly episode where we look back at the standout performers from the past week, whether it's one game performances or just a great week overall. They'll feature in today's episode here. So we'll start off with a couple of high performers in 2027 NHL draft eligible Lynden DuPont. He is 10 years younger than me, and I feel old. Also in the first segment, we'll feature Cullen Potter, who's been playing for Arizona State University in the NCAA in his draft year this year. Has had a couple of great games. In the second segment, we'll look at Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Filip Mesar, both of them having really good seasons so far. And then lastly, we'll look at Sam Dickinson, who scored a hat trick, and Lynden Lakovic, a 2025 NHL draft eligible as well. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please give us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away with the youngster here. The preclusive 2027 NHL draft first overall pick, an exceptional status defender from the WHL, Lynden DuPont has been absolutely fantastic to start the year with the Everett Silvertips. So let's start with his performances, point totals, all that stuff, and get into the profile here with DuPont.
Yeah, so Lynden DuPont is a 5'11", 179-pound right shot defenseman. He's clearly going to grow a little bit more because, as you mentioned, he's 15 years of age, a May 28th, 2009 birthday. This kid was 1 year old when Sidney Crosby... No, sorry. This kid was still a couple months shy of his first birthday when Sidney Crosby scored the golden goal. And so far this season with the Everett Silvertips in the WHL, he has scored 4 goals and 12 points in 9 games as a 15-year-old defenseman, while also playing fantastic defensive hockey, being a really fantastic skater, aggressive on both sides of the puck, extremely confident, can walk the blue line like, I don't know if any other WHL defenseman can match him at that ability just yet. There's a lot to like here, and he's making us two 20-something-year-olds feel very, very old right now. And he's been fantastic to watch. He's tremendously dynamic. And I mean, hey, if you want one quote to kind of sum up just how impressive he is, I think it's on the defensive side of the game. And our colleague Mitch Brown had this to say in a game report he filed on September 29th on Lynden DuPont, saying, "Forget closing at the defensive blue line. DuPont closes at the offensive blue line and kills plays consistently. This guy is very effective at both sides of the ice, and yeah, he's a fantastic prospect. And I mean, look, we're talking about 2027 draft eligibles here, but I mean, these performances have the look of a first overall pick this year, let alone in 2027.
Yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous how good he is at such a young age. And like you mentioned as well, he's going to keep growing. He's going to keep adding weight to his frame. He's probably going to end up, 6'1", 6'2", something in that range. It is absolute. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what Lynden DuPont's doing at such a young age. And that 2009 birthday really hurts. It pains me on a deep level. This kid is ridiculous. It's really impressive what he's been able to do so far this year with that, which, wasn't a very good team last year. And he's kind of turned them on their heads. He's been playing on and off with Terrence Smith on the top pair, upwards of 20 minutes already at such a young age. So great confidence from his coaches. And that comes with the defensive responsibilities that he's been showing. If he was just putting up 12 points in 9 games, but struggling defensively, he wouldn't be playing 20 minutes a night. He'd be playing 15 to 18 minutes a night, as we see often with younger, even draft -2s. He's a draft -3 right now. So, I mean, it's ridiculous how well Lynden DuPont has done so far. And the defensive game is, I think, the most impressive part, right? I mean, this is something that it takes some defensemen, even good defensemen, up until the draft +1, draft +2 to figure out that they can close offensive sequences. They can close defensive sequences at the offensive blue line, that they can punch up early and close plays, nip plays in the bud early, rather than sit back and let guys come to them and then struggle to kill the plays because now there's more space to work with. DuPont is so good at just nipping opposing offensive sequences in the bud right away. And it's the surfing skill, it's the stick work defensively. The skating is ridiculous with DuPont as well. There's just such a well-rounded offensive skill set at such a young age, on top of a really foundationally sound defensive game. But what do you see being the things that DuPont's going to improve over the next couple of years? What do you see as something that by his draft year we're going to go, man, this has gone even more impressive?
Maybe the physical involvement, but like it feels odd that I feel like the need to I'm at the point of nitpicking already, and it's a 15-year-old hockey player where I could just as easily say, I don't know. Like I feel like everything might just improve across the board. Like he's not going to I'd be shocked if he stagnated between now and his draft year. That said, like there's going to be a lot of progression certainly, but there just aren't any weaknesses in his game that I've seen so far that I could really highlight as something that needs to improve. But yeah, I think like right now he's very, very physically competent already at the WHL level. He may become physically dominant by the time he's playing in his draft year season. But again, there really isn't much to critique in this player's game, and he is actually a D-2. He's not quite a D-3, but still, this is a 15-year-old D-2 player who is potentially going to be the best defenseman in the WHL this season. He has some competition with his teammate in Terrence Smith, his pairing mate, as well as guys like Jackson Smith, for instance. But so far this season, I don't think there's been a WHL defenseman who has been more impressive on a consistent basis in my viewings than Lynden DuPont has.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's been fantastic. But let's talk about Cullen Potter as well. It's the other feature in here in our first segment. And Cullen Potter's in his draft year. He's a 2025 NHL draft eligible, slightly undersized. But what's really interesting with him is he's already playing in the NCAA this year with Arizona State University. And he had a fantastic last game against Michigan, right?
He was the best player on the ice in the third period and overtime and shootout that I watched after the Habs game wrapped up. And it was also a game that featured a really ugly play on Michael Hage where two ASU players teamed up on him. But Cullen Potter is a 5'9", 168-pound left shot left winger who's playing there for Arizona State University after playing with the NTDP U17s last year. And he elected to make the jump to the NCAA a year earlier than he needed to. And he's been the offensive driver for ASU so far this season, scoring 4 points through 4 games, 2 goals, 2 assists. On top of that, the shootout winner as well last night, and really showcasing his handling ability. He is incredibly speedy, a fantastic skater, really dynamic with the puck on his stick, a lot of composure and patience as well in his puck touch. He doesn't try to force anything. He waits for the play to open up. He's able to create gaps in coverage. He plays really, really well between checks, both on and off puck. Defensively, he's not a fantastic player just yet, but despite being undersized, he's a fantastic offensive driver and is getting involved defensively despite not reading defensive sequences quite as well as his older teammates do. But as one of the youngest players in college hockey this season, he is a player that I'm going to be keeping my eye on for sure this year, and he's certainly impressed early on this season. But which aspects of his dynamic offensive toolkit have impressed you the most so far?
It's transition driving with him. He just pushes lanes so incredibly well. He creates lanes with this constant kind of east-west movement and transition. He's not a player who necessarily stays in the same lane as he's driving down the ice with the puck. He'll cut inside, he'll delay, he'll wait for defensemen to back off of him and kind of create opportunities for himself to create from the middle of the ice. I think that overall the skill level is really high as well. The shot is good, the playmaking is good, the handling is especially good, I think. Those are kind of the key elements of his game. I don't think you're going to be drafting Cullen Potter to be a Selke winner. I don't think that's his game, but he's still able to intervene when he needs to. So a really interesting overall skill set, a really smart player. who puts in second and third efforts as well. He's not a 0-calorie player either. He's got a high level of energy, and that combines really well with his undersized frame in order to kind of compensate for it and make him a still effective player. Not just an effective player, but a player who's thriving in the NCAA right now. So I see a first rounder. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think he's a first rounder bare minimum from what I've seen so far. I mean, to be the best player on the ice at during the money end of a game in the NCAA against University of Michigan of all teams in the third period and in overtime. I mean, ASU was down by 2 goals with 1:30 left in the game. And Potter was really driving the power play where they were able to climb back by 1 goal. And he scored the game-tying goal. It was a hilarious effort where he as the ASU commentator said, sniped the puck from the red line. So it was from center ice. I would argue that perhaps the goaltender Corpy probably should have saved it. But it was a good shot, I guess, from center ice. But it was a pretty lucky effort. But it was the shootout winner that really just wowed me. The handling skill was on full display, like tremendous top hand mobility, and really, really deceptive, very agile, and can really shift his weight at the turn of a dime. So he's a really dynamic handler, and I see a player that could easily push his way into a top 20 conversation, top 15 conversation by year's end. And I mean, stylistically, I think there are a couple similarities with Cam Schmidt, who we talked about in yesterday's episode. Not nearly as physically engaged as Schmidt is, but that combination of handling and playmaking and skating ability, that dynamism, that fluidity in everything he does on puck is really, really, really nice to see.
Absolutely. And that wraps up our first segment. We'll get into our second segment here where we talk about Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Filip Mesar, 2 great prospects having great seasons at the pro level. We'll get into that in a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Hey NFL fans, you can start the season off big with a massive return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can view live play-by-play, check out the latest stats, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. You can take your swings on whatever sport floats your boat as well, whether it be American football or European football. I mean, the Champions League is now going on in full force with the first 2 match days in the rear view. Or maybe you're not a football fan in any capacity and you prefer tennis or golf. Or, I mean, hey, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever you are most interested in as a sports fan, FanDuel has something that really should interest you. You'll get started with $200 in free bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here. We look at Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Filip Mesar, both of which are having great seasons so far at the pro level. Axel Sandin-Pellikka is playing over in the SHL, and he's gone a point a game so far to start the year as a right-handed defenseman who was drafted 17th overall by the Detroit Red Wings in the 2023 NHL draft. He was my personal favorite defenseman from that draft class, but he ended up slipping to 17th, getting picked, I think, as a third defenseman after David Reinbacher and Dmitry Simashev, unless I'm forgetting someone in between those guys. I believe he was the third pick defenseman there, and he's been just absolutely money to start the year. Talk me through the point totals, refresh us on his size and handedness. Just a great prospect overall, isn't he?
He's a fantastic prospect, and he was actually the 4th defenseman selected on draft day because Tom Willander went 11th overall to Vancouver as well. So a lot of right shot defensemen in that draft class. But yeah, he's been fantastic this season, and a bit undersized, certainly still at 5'11", 185. But through 9 games in the SHL, he has scored 8 points, including 3 goals, and just been offensively dynamic, which has always been the case going back to his D-1 season. The on-puck ability, his ability to walk the line in the offensive zone, just overall being at the fulcrum in the offensive zone on the cycle. He is one of the best players still outside the NHL today. And Detroit certainly got a really, really skilled player there at 17th overall in that 2023 draft class. But what I've really appreciated with Sandin-Pellikka is also how he's been improving in leveraging his skating in the defensive zone. The offensive ability we have always known is fantastic, and there aren't really too many question marks around the translatability of that. So it's no surprise that he's scoring so many points in a league as strong as the SHL, even when he's still only 19 years old. He only turns 20 in March. So that said, defensively, he's gotten a lot better at also layering stick work into his transition defending, and also going stick first, but also body second. In his draft year, he was a really good stick first defender, but just wouldn't play the body at all in many situations, even at the J20 level. But he's gotten a lot better at that in recent seasons. And I mean, with his high level of mobility, he's really able to kill plays as well. He's not a guy that's going to finish his checks massively, but he's able to take players out of the play now and really just separate opponent from puck, which is what you want to see from your mobile, undersized defenseman, to be engaged physically, even if they're not throwing these massive hits that get the crowd out of their seats. But with ASP, what has been the thing that maybe you were most looking for him to improve in his draft year, and how has that necessarily changed since then?
I think you mentioned it really well. It's the layering of stick and body. I think that's kind of improved a decent amount. I never really expected Axel Sandin-Pellikka to become kind of a top-end defensive defenseman. That's not his game. It never really will be. But just to be efficient enough physically in order to pry pucks off of forwards and be able to use those loose pucks and turn them into something great. I think the main issue with Sandin-Pellikka is still the breakout game. He falters under high pressure, and the pressure he's facing in the SHL is relatively weak compared to the pressure he's going to be facing in the AHL or the NHL. So my issue is right now in the SHL he's still struggling with handling hard pressure. When he does get pressured by an opponent on the forecheck, even with the more time and space that he has right now than he will at pro levels, he's still struggling right now. So that's my concern with Sandin-Pellikka, is that will really need to come a couple steps. But the physical game has improved, that's for sure. But let's move on to Filip Mesar as well, who's been very interesting to start the year for the Laval Rockets in the AHL. The Habs prospect was selected in the late first round of the 2022 NHL draft as a 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", 170-pound winger, has been playing really, really well. He's already played pro hockey, right? I mean, in his draft year, he was playing full-time in the Slovak Extraliga and was doing pretty good in that league. But this is different. The AHL is different, and I'm really happy to see him go off to a bomb of a start here with 4 points in his first 2 games. What's been your read on Filip Mesar's game so far with the Laval Rocket?
Filip Mesar plays his best hockey in professional environments, and he relies on his teammates making pro-level reads to play his best hockey. This is why he was shining so brightly in his draft year in the Slovak Pro League, where as an undersized 17, 18-year-old, he scored 8 goals and 16 points in 37 games for HK Poprad. A really, really good output, but he was like a power play bumper to a really, really good extent on that team. And the last 2 seasons with Kitchener, even though last year Kitchener had a far better offensive roster than they did the year before that, which was a bit of a tire fire, he still struggled a little bit to produce offense. He only scored 51 points in 52 games in his first year and 52 points in 45 games in his second year. And he was also quite vocal in some Slovakian interviews about just being frustrated about his line mates and teammates not making the reads and taking the routes that he wanted them to, because he's a really high-level playmaker and has a very good idea of what he wants his teammates to do so he can get the puck to them in dangerous areas. He has a pretty good shot as well from the bumper area, but it's the playmaking game that makes him shine brightest in the offensive zone. He has a really high motor as well. He's physically engaged despite being undersized, very hard worker, and a really, really fantastic skater. The skating mechanics are really nice, and he's a really speedy guy as well from the wing. I'm glad he's been developing on the wing rather than down the middle, which was rumored a bit in his draft year. He also wanted to play a bit more down the middle, I remember him saying, but it's on the wing, I think, where he does his best work, where he's able to leverage his speed, where he's able to leverage his playmaking as well, from where he's most effective as a playmaker, which is a bit more from the perimeter, where he's cutting a little bit more inside towards the hash marks and can just fizz pucks across seam onto the tape of his line mates. And he's been off to a very hot start with Laval, as you mentioned, with a goal and 4 points in 2 games so far this season. He had started off the year with a 3-point game against the Providence Bruins, and has just been very offensively involved and seems very relieved to be able to rely on his line mates' reads being professional level and professional style in terms of being very much net driven, which is not necessarily the case in the OHL.
For sure. And that wraps things up for our second segment here. We'll get into our third, where we talk about Sam Dickinson and Lynden Lakovic, a couple of junior players playing really well. We'll get into that in a sec, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Game Time and Prize Picks. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. Game Time is safe, secure, incredibly easy to use, and they are absolutely obsessed with saving you money. They've got deals at every step of the way, flash deals, zone deals, last minute deals, and you even get the Game Time guarantee, which makes sure that you get the best price for your tickets. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer you, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I use Game Time all the time. I mean, I've got a schedule that changes around a ton depending on when we're recording podcasts, when my work shifts change around. So it's really great to just be able to pull up Game Time and see what kind of events are in my area. It's not just for sports, it's comedy, theater, whatever needs a ticket, you can get on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. You just create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are safe, fast, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long with Prize Picks. I know I love Prize Picks because I can take my swings on the players that I really think are going to do well in any given week. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment where we'll talk about Sam Dickinson and Lynden Lakovic. Now, Sam Dickinson just had a hat trick as a defenseman in the OHL with the London Knights. He's back for his draft +1. Played decently well in camp for San Jose, but obviously didn't make the cut. But he's back in force and has been performing really, really well. Let's talk about that hat trick game as well, because it was a hat trick of power play goals, if I believe, right?
I believe so. But yeah, it was 3 goals against the Barrie Colts in a 5-4 victory. Funnily enough, he was actually also a -1 in that game. He was on the ice for all 4 goals against, despite scoring a hat trick. But this has been a really great offensive week for Sam Dickinson. In the last 5 games, he has 4 goals and 7 points. That's been his entire season as well. But yeah, the offensive numbers have been massive. The defensive impact hasn't been quite as good as we got accustomed to last season. But I mean, we love to see the offensive flair here, and I'm sure that the defensive game is going to stabilize as well as the year goes on. But this is a player that I think both of us have always really enjoyed watching, even if there always are some frustrating reads in his game and some just complete miscues on both sides of the puck as well. But still, the physical tools are fantastic. 6'3", 203 pounds as a left shot defenseman. He's also very young for the last draft class. It's a June 7th birthday. And to get him at 11th overall, I thought was fantastic business for the San Jose Sharks, and that they were, I think, understandably very giddy walking up to the podium there with that selection. And adding Magnus Celebrini and Sam Dickinson in one draft class is, that's good business. And I mean, they got Igor Chernyshov as well in the second round.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean that's not the end of that. They had a great draft overall, but yeah, I just checked, and it was 3 power play goals from Sam Dickinson. So that -1 is actually just 1 goal against on the ice, since power plays do not count against plus.
That makes more sense.
Exactly. But yeah, fantastic game from Dickinson overall. Just really showcased that ability to just rifle pucks from the point. He's very comfortable doing that. And he's very active offensively. I think the main thing with Dickinson is just improving that decision making, getting more consistent with his reads, that kind of stuff. I think that'll come with time. These defensemen, these kind of erratic defensemen, especially from the London Knights, usually tend to figure out the decision making process as they climb the ranks rather than exploring with decision making at the OHL level, because London's system is very structurally sound, very rigid, and expects something very simple and easy from their defensemen, which is rip pucks from the point, jump up in the rush, take shots as much as you can, get as many pucks on net as possible, and the forwards will jump on rebounds, right? So it was the issue we saw with Logan Mailloux.
Yeah.
His decision making didn't improve much after his draft year. We've seen it with Oliver Bonk so far as well. But as we've seen with Mailloux, once you reach the pro level and start playing more consistently at the AHL or NHL level, you start developing that decision making, that reaction time, that quickness of processing as you develop in the pro ranks. Would you agree?
I would. And I mean, Logan Mailloux is also joint top of AHL scoring at the moment alongside Filip Mesar with 4 points through 2 games. But to go back to your point, Sam Dickinson has been taking a lot of shots this year. Through the 5 games, his shot totals have been 9 shots, 7, 7, 6, 6. He is rifling pucks on goal. All the goals he's gotten so far this season, all 4 have been power play goals. So also the one other goal that didn't come in the hat trick game also came on the power play. So very offensively involved. And I think, as you mentioned as well, there's definitely still some a lack of refinement in certain areas of his game. But that's also something that he can iron out at the AHL level. I definitely think he would benefit from a season in the AHL before playing full-time NHL minutes to kind of adapt more to professional style of game and also work on those weaknesses that we were talking about. But to go from one 6'4" player to another, let's wrap up the show here with Lynden Lakovic, who we talked about a little bit in yesterday's episode. We wanted to dive in a little bit deeper. And also, I mean, he's featuring in this week's Rinkside Roundup article, so we got to talk about him here as well. The 6'4", 185-pound left shot winger has been on fire for the Moose Jaw Warriors this season, scoring 4 goals and 10 points through 8 games. And Lakovic is a really, really great goal scorer, and he always has been. But as we explored yesterday, it's the playmaking game that has evolved a bunch this season. And I mean, if people want to hear a deep dive on the playmaking specifically, go and watch yesterday's episode. But beyond those offensive tools, what has it been in his decision-making and his reading of the game and his habits that has made him a top 10 caliber prospect in this 2025 draft class?
Yeah, so what's so interesting about Lakovic's kind of processing and decision making is that I think it's improved alongside the playmaking skill in and of itself. He started using lookoffs, he started kind of connecting with saucers and area passes and all that stuff. But above all, and most importantly, it's those habits. It's the ability to delay, to deceive, to manipulate lanes, to open up kind of the ice laterally for his team. That's kind of those are the habits and reads that have improved alongside the playmaking skill that make that playmaking so effective, so efficient. I think that's kind of for me the best part of Lakovic's playmaking skills, actually the reads and habits that come with it. The only real thing, and we mentioned that yesterday briefly as well, but I want to expand a bit further on it, is the physicality with Lakovic. As a 6'4" player, you'd expect him to win more battles than he does. You'd expect him to get inside positioning more than he does, and he just doesn't. And it's a pretty big issue at this stage in his progression. Um, he gets pushed off pucks really easily. He defaults to the outside really easily. I think those are really the main issues with Lakovic's game because everything skill-wise has been absolutely phenomenal. Everything pace and speed-wise has been absolutely phenomenal. And that's why he's a top 10 pick in our rankings here at Elite Prospects. But beyond that, I think, in terms of the physicality, it's a will thing more than it is a mechanics thing. You can see that sometimes he can get his body low. He knows how. It's just there's a defaulting to the outside, a bit of a passiveness physically that kind of limits how effective he can be, right?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that as a whole. And like the nice thing about that being our gripe is that it's pretty fixable. Like if the mechanics are that strong, and we've seen so much progression from him in various areas in the last year. I mean, especially the playmaking ability has just been completely overhauled in the past like 6 months only. I really do think that at least when he's drafted and is in contact with an NHL like development staff, that's going to be a thing that gets like really hammered in, and it's also something that'll just improve the more reps he gets in, whether it be at the WHL level or once he makes a leap to the AHL, NHL, etc. He's going to have to work on that, and that'll also be the expectation for him as a player of his size. Like everyone knows, it is the skill and the offensive creativity and the offensive impact that he brings that'll be his money making tool. But adding in the more physical tools and physical habits, as you mentioned, will play a big role in his ability to really like hammer down a spot in the top 6 or potentially even a top line long term in the NHL.
For sure, and I think it's going to be a similar kind of syndrome to the one we saw with Yuri Slafkovsky,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
in terms of his development, just improving that board mechanics play, that ability to play along the boards, to be more heads up and conscious and aware physically, has really brought Slafkovsky's game to another level. And I think we're going to see something similar from Lakovic as he develops. But the higher up he gets picked, the more chances he has of improving that, because the higher up you're picked, the more your team invests in terms of effort into you as a prospect. So that'll be an interesting.
Absolutely. And also being 6'4" immediately helps your chances. A six
Yeah.
foot four forward is going to get a lot more investment in his development than a 5'8" forward will on average, but based on the most NHL teams that draft them.
I think that's a byproduct of teams not really valuing 5'8" forwards as much and picking them
A little
lower,
bit.
but it's a chicken or the egg scenario regardless. But that's it for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to follow with the rest of our content as we finalize the month of October. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian I, and we hope you tune in next time.